Hello, everyone, and welcome to another installment of the Esri GeoDev webinar series. About 3 years ago, we started this series as a way to continue engaging in developer-related topics and discussions in between Dev Summits. We have a lot of new topics, advanced features, and additional functionality to share with you over the coming months, so be sure to stay connected with us through our GeoDev webinar series page on go.esri.com/geodev or any of our social media accounts at Esri GeoDev. We would love to have conversations like these taking place throughout the year so that when we do meet at one of our Dev Summit conferences, it will be as though we never stopped. We hope you get as much or more out of this webinar than you anticipated. Now we would like to introduce you to today's webinar, Developing with ArcGIS Experience Builder. Before we get started, we'd like to go over a few items so you know how to participate in today's event. We've taken a screenshot of an example of the attendee interface. You should see something like this on your own computer desktop in the upper right corner. You're listening in using your computer's speaker system by default. If you would prefer to join over the phone, just select Use Telephone in the audio pane and the dial-in information will be displayed. You will have the opportunity to submit text questions to today's presenters by typing your questions into the questions pane of the control panel. You may send in your questions at any time during the presentation. We will collect these and address them during the Q&A portion at the end of today's presentation. I would now like to introduce you to one of our presenters today, Gavin Raykemper. Gavin, let's get started, shall we?
Thanks, Amy. Welcome to the Developing for ArcGIS Experience Builder GeoDev webinar. I'm Gavin Raykemper, a developer at Esri, and I'm here with my colleagues David Martinez and Yue Ma from the Experience Builder team, and we've got a variety of topics to show you today. If you're in this webinar, we're assuming you have some familiarity with Experience Builder, so we'll do a very quick intro and then jump right into a demo of how to create a basic custom widget for Experience Builder. David will then dive deep into some more advanced development topics like global state, message actions, and more. Yue will then focus on theme development and theme customization. Finally, we'll have a chance for you to ask questions in the Q&A session, so please submit those like Amy was saying. ArcGIS Experience Builder empowers you to quickly transform your data into compelling web apps. You can build map-centric or non-map-centric apps and display them in a fixed or scrolling screen on a single or multiple pages. It gives you complete control of the layout. You can easily add widgets, build with the provide templates, and even extend the platform with custom widgets and themes. Our goal is to allow you to build compelling web experiences for your audiences. For developers who are customizing Experience Builder, like all of us here today, the GIMU library comes built in to allow you to build things quickly and easily. So here are just a few of the modules, like the GIMU UI and GIMU layouts to help you build great-looking user interfaces. And the GIMU ArcGIS library gives us access to the ArcGIS API for JavaScript version 4. There are a variety of manager classes within GIMU core for working with widgets, configs, data sources, and more. The entire ecosystem is built on TypeScript, React, and Redux, and a Webpack task is provided that will build and package your code. So enough talking about it, let's actually use some of these modules within a custom widget demo. So getting started with Experience Builder Developer Edition is the first step. You'll go to developers.arcgis.com, go to documentation and click Experience Builder. You'll download the zip file right here and unzip it and use the npm commands and install and run it. This is well documented on the website under the guide right here. So we're skipping that today so that we can really focus in on the code. I've already installed Developer Edition on my computer and I've run the npm start in the server folder to run Experience Builder Developer Edition. To get started with development, we'll make a copy of a sample widget that will end up being the widget that we deploy. We're going to build a widget today that will show the latitude and longitude of the mouse as it hovers over the map. So let's go ahead and call this widget Get Map Coordinates. I'll switch over to my File Explorer. Here is the location where I extracted my Experience Builder Dev Edition files. I'll go into the Client, Your Extensions, and Widgets folder, and I'll copy this simple widget. Now we'll rename the folder, what I just said, get map coordinates. And then one other thing, I'll go into that folder and open the manifest.json file. So that I can properly rename it right here. I want to make sure that the name here in the manifest is the same as the folder name that I created. You can also edit some of the metadata here, the author, the description, etc. And also, we know we're going to be using modules from the ArcGIS API for JavaScript because our widget is interacting with the map control to show the latitude and longitude. So we must tell Experience Builder via the manifest.json file so it knows to load those dependencies. So I'll create a property called dependency and tell it to load Jimu ArcGIS. Great. So now I'll go over to my terminal. In the client folder right here, I'll run npm start. That will start the Webpack task to copy and build my widgets. Now, I recommend everyone to use Visual Studio Code as their primary text editor. You can use whatever you want, but Visual Studio Code just does a really great job about understanding the TypeScript environment out of the box. And when you add the client folder to a project, so let me do that here. I'll go back to my Windows Explorer, go to that client folder, and just drag that into my VS Code. That's going to open the entire client folder as a VS Code project, and it really allows VS Code to scan the entire project, find all the TypeScript types, and helps you in coding. So as an example for that, let's open that widget that we just created, get map coordinates. I'll go into the source runtime folder to the main widget file. And we see this is a React TypeScript component. And I wanted to show a little bit about why TypeScript is nice. So TypeScript allows you, adds types and saves us from a lot of the mistakes that previously in the JavaScript world, we would do some coding and switch over to the browser and see that any errors and have to fix them, where TypeScript kind of saves us that, that process of going back and forth from the editor. So for example, down here where we're using this.props.config, if we misspelled this for some reason, TypeScript will, there will be a red underscore here and it'll tell us there's a problem. Similarly, as you're coding, if you open up the autocomplete, it shows me all the methods and properties that are available. So it really makes our code a lot easier to code, and it saves us some time. So to do some actual development, we must have an experience that our custom widget is inside of. So let's get going on that. I'll switch over to Experience Builder Dev Edition in my browser, create a new experience. I'll choose one of the templates. And I'll set up just a basic experience. So maybe I want to choose what map I want to show. Just choose a basic base map here. Set my initial extent. And you can do other things, of course, like change the title, change what widgets are showing up, etc. But the most important one would be to remove this initial widget over here, and I'm going to go ahead and add the get map coordinates widget that we just created. So again, it was a copy of the simple widget, so that's why it says this, and I'll save that out. Now that we've got an experience we can develop with, what I like to do is make a small change to the code to make sure that our development environment is all set up and running and ready to go. So right where it said simple widget right there, maybe I'll just make a small text change by adding some exclamation points. I can switch over to the Webpack task to make sure it's copying it out. And I'll refresh the experience to ensure that those changes are there. So there's the exclamation points that I just added. And now that I know my environment's fully set up and ready to go. So now we're really ready to start development in earnest. One of the exciting things about Experience Builder is that it's extremely customizable in terms of the widgets you can add. You can add as many widgets of each type as you want, including the map widget. So because of this, when developing a custom widget that interacts with a single map widget, that custom widget must provide a way for the experience author to choose which map widget they want this widget to interact with. So our widget is going to, again, show the current latitude and longitude of the mouse hovering over the map. So we must allow the experience author to choose the map that they want to show the latitude and longitude of. So when I select my widget, we see the settings for it is currently just an empty JavaScript object, and that's because we haven't defined out the settings panel yet. So let's update the settings panel to allow the experience author to choose the map. So to do that, I will go to the source folder and create a new folder called setting, and within that, a new file called setting.tsx. This will be a TSX file, a React component. So you can start by just creating a React component. I have a VS Code extension here that allows me to create a React component quickly. And so that's kind of our initial setup right there. Now, the first thing we want to do is add our dependencies on Jimu. So we're going to actually get React from the Jimu core. And then we're going to change our class to actually extend from React.PureComponent. The next thing we're seeing is TypeScript is saying that we haven't included our imconfig. Imconfig is just a reference to the widget config file. So we'll add that. And next we want to actually add the dropdown to allow the person to choose which map they want to work with. So to do that, we'll add code to the render function. The core component we're using is this Jimu map view selector, which is a component that comes with the Jimu library. It's just going to be a little drop-down select that shows all the maps in the experience. When the drop-down changes, this function will get called. So first we have to import that module. So after I imported it from Jimu UI, you can see that those red underlines went away. And we just need to define out the function that we want it to call when the dropdown changes. And we'll call that onMapWidgetSelected. And that function is pretty simple. We just use the onSettingChange function, which comes from Jimu, to pass the widget IDs, which map widget ID we want, and it'll save it for us. So I'll save this. One extra step here is I need to go back to my terminal, my client folder, and just restart the Webpack task. Because I added that setting.tsx file, we need to restart it so it can see that new file that we added. So now that that's there, I'll go back to my browser in the Experience Builder user interface and refresh the page. And now when I select my widget, now instead of that JSON object, we actually have a UI with a dropdown where I can select which map I want to operate on. If there were more maps in the experience, there would be more listed there, obviously. And I can save and publish that. So now that our widget code can have access to the map setting, we can start coding our main widget file. So I'll go back to our code, and that's in widget.tsx. Right now, it's an extremely simple widget that just shows some text. The first step is to make sure we have string translations in place. You may be wondering why we should do this first, especially because we're not planning on making our widget widely translated. One reason is that it helps you to keep all your text displayed in the app in one convenient location for others to update later if they need to. Also, it's pretty easy to add this at the beginning, but it's harder to add later. So I recommend everyone to add translations at the beginning. To do that, we'll create a new folder within runtime called translations and a file called default.ts. That's going to be a TypeScript file. In that default.ts file, we're just going to export a single JavaScript object with the key being what we're going to use in our widget and the value being the string that we actually want to display. So we'll take this key, this variable, and we'll use it over in our widget.tsx. First, we have to actually import formatted messages module, which is what we'll use. And we have to import that file we just created. So we'll just import that and call it default messages. We can now use formatted message to display our message. So I'll do that in the render function right down here. So here we're using the formatted message and we're just passing it the latitude longitude variable that we just created. And so Experience Builder will automatically switch that out when we load up the experience. We'll reset our Webpack task one more time since we just created that new TypeScript file. And switch over to, let's actually open our experience in a preview now. And there's the latitude and longitude, so it's automatically swapping that out, which is great. What if we want to actually add a translation? Well, the next step is to do that, to add a language to the translations that we're supporting. First, we go to the manifest.json file. We add the locale string that we're going to support. Let's support Spanish today. So I'll add ES to that variable in the manifest.json. And then back in the translations folder, I'll create a new file for each language that I'm supporting. So in this case, I'll create es.js. And that's going to also export a JavaScript object, this time using the define syntax, where you're going to use the same variable name, but the values being the translated string this time. So now we can switch back to our browser. We normally would, we could switch our browser language if we wanted to, but Experience Builder does have a shortcut for us. We can just add $locale and then the locale that we want to test in the URL bar, and then that will simulate as if our browser was in that language. And you can see here that it was translated for us. So now we have those translations in place. So now let's add the code that allows us to get a reference to the map object. We do this using the Jimu map view component from the Jimu ArcGIS module that is provided with Experience Builder. So to do this, we first have to import it into our widget.tsx. Do that right there. So this is going to be the component we're going to use, and then we need to reference it in our JSX. So I'll paste in some here. So this was a large block of code, but the first 3 lines are just saying, hey, if someone's already chosen a map widget within that settings panel that we just created, only then show our Jimu map view component. The map view component basically ties together that setting and a function that will get called when the Jimu map view component is available. So we need to define out that function. We're calling it active view change handler. So let's define it right above the render function. And it'll give us JMV, which is a Jimu map view, which we can then use. So saving that, let's open our developer console since we're console.logging out that JMV. And so here's what we just logged out. And so that's all working. And this view property is a reference to the JavaScript API map view. And so now that's something that we can use. In fact, we can go over, let me open a new tab and go to the ArcGIS API for JavaScript documentation and look up that module in the API reference. We know that's an instance of a map view. So any of these properties we can look at, the methods we can call, or in this case, we want to use an event. So we can utilize any of these events This time we're going to go ahead and use the pointer move event. So let's take that back to our code, and instead of logging out JMV, we actually want to use that variable and use the JavaScript API to create an event. So on pointer move, like we just saw, we want to create a point and then set the state. Now TypeScript is telling us we have an error because we're using the JavaScript API. And if you remember back in the manifest.json file, we had told Experience Builder that we're using the JavaScript API. So to solve this issue is as easy as importing point using the require syntax, and this is the reference to the JavaScript API, and now we're good to go there. A few more things. We're setting the state down here, but we haven't told TypeScript about the state that we want to support. So let's create an interface called iState, and we'll pass our state to our class here. Now that TypeScript knows about our state, it's telling us that when we're creating the initial state, we don't have the proper properties. So let's create that. We'll just make the latitude and longitude empty initially. And then every time the pointer moves, we're going to update our state with the new latitude and longitude. The last step here is just to show the latitude and longitude in the UI. With React, that's very easy using the curly bracket syntax. And now switching back to our browser. We can see here, while the map's loading, you can see right up here that the latitude and longitude is being shown as I move my mouse. So that's basically what we wanted today. One last really quick thing, UA is going to show some information on how to make this widget look really good with styles and themes later. But we can do one thing, which is to use utility classes. In the paragraph here, I'll say class name equals, and here are some utility classes to show a shadow, to add a margin, to add a padding, and to make the background white. So now when I do that, our widget should look a little bit better here. So now we have that shadow, we have the white background, and it looks really, really good. So now we have our widget is complete, and Dave will now tell us more about widget state and more advanced widget topics that we can take it from here. Dave?
So thanks, Gavin. In the next two sections, we're going to be talking about state. So what is state? Well, in the simplest terms, it's a JavaScript object that represents the part of a component, widget, that can change. For example, it's a result of a user's interaction. For all intents and purposes, it's the component memory. Now, I'm going to be using the word component and widget interchangeably because basically widgets are basically React components. In an Experience Builder, we use both local and global state. And one is not necessarily better than the other. And in fact, each one serves its own purpose and provides a solution to a problem. For example, in the widget Gavin built, it focused clearly on using local state where each component has managed its own state, where the state is held within the widget and manipulated with set.state if you're doing class component, or if you're using use state in a functional component. In some scenarios though, you might need to have state that is maintained outside the component tree, and this is called global state. For instance, maybe you need to keep track of a configuration setting by another widget. This is where global state will come into play. And we use Redux in Experience Builder to manage global state. What are some of the decisions that I like to consider when deciding when to use local or global? The first is, I like to ask myself, well, is the state shared by widgets? And this one is pretty straightforward. You would use global state, and that happens to be Redux. Now, we're not talking about like setting state for the local widget. We're more talking about using state sharing across some piece of different widgets, for instance. And if the answer is no to that question, that it doesn't need to be shared, Well, the next question is, well, does the state need to be shared any access configs or any data source managers? Like, do we need to access a message manager, or maybe you need to get the app state such as the client ID? And if the answer is yes, then use global state for that piece of state. And if not, use local state. But as you get more familiar, if you're starting to begin your journey on React, you're going to use probably a combination of both, and particularly sometimes in Experience Builder if you need to be. Now here what we're looking at here is an example of local state, where it begins with the constructor method, which is provided by React, which initializes the state. And here we're assigning an object to this.state. And then it uses this component didMount method, which is also provided by React, to run if not this state.api loaded. Then what happens here is we load the JS API modules. So here we're lazy loading them for this particular widget. And then we set the state for API loaded to true to update the state object. Now let's switch gears and focus on global state. As I mentioned before, Experience Builder uses Redux, right, to centrally manage the state of the application. Redux, does state management using functional principles where all the application's state is stored in the store, okay? So how does Redux basically work? Well, first, it starts with an action. That action is an object that is dispatched to the store. And then what happens is it contains some piece of data, whether it's string. And then second, actions are dispatched to this thing called a reducer. And this is just the JavaScript function. It determines what part of the state is changed. It takes two parameters, current state and the action. And then it produces the state of an application, such as an extent change. So as we look at this, once the extent change, that action triggers again and it updates the store. And if it keeps changing, then it updates. And that's basically Redux. So let's look at a quick example here. Let's start with a demo. So here we have a simple Redux input value changing on state. So I'm going to type in hello, and every time I change this, I have this input, it's setting the props underneath on it, and it's changing state. So how do we implement and take advantage of a Redux store? So let's go in our code here. Let's get into our right widget here. So here in Experience Builder, you would have a folder called, in mine, in extensions. We have this thing called mystore.tss. And in here, we're going to create an extension class to implement this Redux store extension. And as I mentioned before, Redux works on actions. So here we have this get actions to return our actions based upon my keys, which I declared up here as interface types, okay? And then in this particular one method here, where we're going to return the local state, here we're just setting null. And then the actual logistics of things happens at the reducer. So the reducer basically specifies how the app state changes, okay? So it's a switch in case my action keys, return local set A for this action value, other if it's key 2, set it at B, and the default return local. And to return the local for my state, you would do get store, return my state. So what you need to do for your manifest JSON is you need to declare under the extensions property, what is the store, what's the point of it, location, and the URI, okay? And how this Redux store changes is there's this onChange function that basically dispatches the action based on the target value, and then here's my input offering on the change. So that's an example of how to create a Redux store. So now let's talk about message actions. Message actions is a way to support communication between widget to widget, widget to framework, and framework to widget. Think of a message action as a way to send data from your application to the store. And the only piece of information is actually just a plain JavaScript object. And the way you define and publish a message is it's identified by a message type, and that's all defined by the GMU framework, and that's all part of Experience Builder. So to publish a message, you basically use the publish method with the message type, such as if it was an extent change or data record selection change. And then the action is only describes what happens, right? It doesn't describe how the application state changes. And some of the supported message types we have out of the box are string selection change, extent change, and so on. And once you create, for example, if you have a widget that's public of a message type, you want to update the manifest JSON. Now, to create a message action, you'll need to extend the abstract message action class. And what we have is we have several methods and functions that help with developing message actions. The first is the filter message type method. And this is used to filter the available actions. And so in this code snippet, it basically returns the message type string selection change and data selection change. And then the filter message method is used to filter messages in the message manager. And then if you're going to be sharing your message action with your users to allow configurations, we have this get setting UI component that allows you to create the UI for that action. And creating the UI is very similar to creating the setting for a widget. If you don't plan on having that, you can manually configure the action in the config file. Now, up until this point, we're only defining the message type, but we're really not defining how to handle that for the logistics part of things. Well, the onExecute method handles the logic for what you would like to happen for your message type. For example, in this snippet below, it basically selects the action based on the message type and sends it from the application to the store. And then we use the getStoreApp function using the dispatch property, and this dispatches the reduc action and allows the state to be updated. So let's take a look at how that works. First, let's show a demo. All right. So here we have 4 widgets on the screen, and this is basically going to show you an example of using message actions using string selection. We have a map widget here. We have a widget which basically contains the action, and it's listening for these. We have 2 published messages. The first one is published message here that's querying the name of region name and pulling these values in here. And then we have this other published message, which just is a drop-down dialog box, hard-coded with these strings, just to show you could do that approach as well. So if I change this value to, let's go Southwest here, this message updates here. It listens for this string selection change. Query string region name equals Southwest. Query state is loaded. The query result is region name. It changed here. This one didn't change, of course, because it's not listening to that, and it's a drop down. But let's go ahead and change this one to Southeast. Now you're going to notice this published message is listening to that, so it updates that. So that's an example of message actions. So how do we wire that up in code? So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go into our widgets that's doing the published message, okay? And this published message is using this message manager class, get instance, published message, and we're going to define a new string selection change, taking some parameters for the ID, which is the widget, and the current target value selected. It's basically what this widget does, is publishing the message. And then in the manifest JSON, you have this published methods property. It takes this array here, and basically you're going to put in your message types. So for this particular one, it's doing a string selection change. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go over to our subscribe widget, which has the action, okay? And this action contains the logic to make this action work. Here we're extending the abstract message action class. We have our filtering message type, which returns the message types we want to work with. We have our filter message here. And then if we have a UI for this component, it's calling it from this actions query action setting, which is here. Okay, that's our UI for this. And then on execute, for this particular one, since we know it's going to be message type this, it's a string selection change. It's going to have the string selection change here, which is basically going to pass that to the App Store, which dispatches this for the widget state prop change. This is going to take the widget ID. This is a key, and this is going to say region name equals whatever they selected, okay? And then the last step to do is in the manifest file, you need to declare for the widget that has the action, have a message actions property with the name and the location of the query action and the settings if it has one. So that's an example of how to develop a message action. So now what I'm going to do is hand it over to my colleague Yue and have Yue talk about themes and how you customize those. Yue?
All right, thanks, David. So in the next sections, I'm going to walk through the theme framework and the UI components in the UI system in Experience Builder to see how we can customize the look and feel for your widgets and apps, and to see what are the existing features that you can utilize already in your UI development. So first, we are going to start with the themes. So the themes in Experience Builder, they define the look and feel of the applications you create. They are first customizable. This means the out-of-box themes, which are shown on the right in the screenshot, they all can be reconfigured. For example, you can change the colors or fonts on the existing themes. Second, they are also extensible. This means by using the developer version, you can create a new theme folder within your extensions directory and provide with your own theme for the apps to use. So the engine that powers these themes is the theme framework. The framework follows the same philosophy as other popular UI frameworks, such as the Bootstrap framework. And in the framework, we have the default theme. This one serves as the foundation for all the other custom themes. And it contains two major parts. First one are the variables. The variables are the design tokens, such as the colors, font, spacing, border, shadow, and etc. The second part are the style modules. Since we are using CSS in JavaScript to write styles, the style sheets are written as JavaScript functions. And within these functions, they reference the theme variables as the property values to dynamically generate the CSS files. So first, let's take a look at the core variables. The first and probably the most important one, the variables are the theme colors. This because the colors, they play a very great part in defining an application's overall look and feel. And these colors, they are named by their use scenarios or intentions, such as the primary color is used to emphasize primary elements. And as shown in the picture below, these 8 theme colors, then they generate color palettes using different grayscales to provide you more color variations. And all these colors plus the black, white, and the transparent, they together make the color system within the framework. Next, we have the theme font variables. The variables include definitions for font family, sizes, weights, line heights, and font preset styles, such as the headings, body, and caption. Besides these two, there are also 3 other groups of core theme variables, such as the spacing, which is mainly used for the margins and paddings, and the border radiuses, and then the shadows. So all these theme variables, they have their own corresponding CSS utility classes, which was demoed in Gavin's demo widget. These classes can be easily added to any UI element to quickly apply a style from the theme. And these utility classes, they follow the same naming convention as Bootstrap, such as the background colors, text colors, borders, and etc. Yeah, and here's just another quick sample showing how you can quickly add styles to a widget by adding these utility classes. Here in this demo widget, we are adding a light background color, primary text color, shadow, padding, and make the container rounded. Next, let's take a deeper look at how the theme works in Experience Builder. So in this diagram, in this black box is the theme itself. Within the theme, we have the variables, and the first part is are the core variables. As I mentioned, they are translated to utility CSS classes, and they are also referenced by the component variables, such as the variables for the buttons, navigations, and text boxes. And these variables are then referenced by the component style modules to generate CSS files to be applied to the UI components to make those from unstyled components to styled components. And since all the widgets are using the UI components from the theme, this is how the theme can be applied to the apps. Next, let's take a look at the available UI components from Experience Builder. Here is just a simple screenshot showing some of the most commonly used UI components that you can already use in your UI development from the Experience Builder's GMU UI framework. And one of the benefits is all these components, they are deeply integrated with the theme framework, which means when you switch between different themes, the look and feel of these components can also be changed dynamically. And this is also why it is encouraged to use the UI components from a GMU UI before trying out any other UI libraries. Yeah, just for a consistent look and feel. And one thing to mention is since developer version 1.1, we added this storybook support for the developers to preview the theme variables and UI components. And here's a link. Here's a link to the online version that you can use as a reference. Okay. And then last, I'm going to do a demo on theme customization. And there are two approaches to create a new theme. First one is to overwrite the default theme variables within a JSON file. And the second approach is to provide additional style modules or style sheets in the theme folder. So let's go to the demo. Okay, so here within your extensions directory, I have already added this empty demo theme under the themes directory. By the way, the sample theme can be downloaded from this developer's doc page over here. So when you click this link, it will open a robust repository that you can download all the samples for widgets and the themes that you can use. Okay. And here's within the builder, have added not just this demo theme, but also 3 other demo themes just to show different stages from my demo. So the initial one, it is no difference from the default theme that you can see from this demo app. So first, I'm going to show you how to overwrite the theme variables by adding more attributes within this variables.json file. So within the demo theme folder, let's open this variables.json file. So what I'm going to do here, I am going to override the primary color to this purple bluish color, and change the font family to impact, and also change the font size to 1 rand, which equals to 16 pixels. So after that, I'm not going to refresh the builder. So the result is going to be this demo theme 2. So when I switch to demo theme 2, you can see that the primary color has been applied to, for example, the header and also the primary color. And also you can tell that the font family has changed to this bold impact font family. Next, I'm going to show you how to change your theme from a light theme to a dark theme. It is very simple, which is just to turn this dark theme parameter to true. And on the fly, the builder will dynamically swap the light and dark colors to change it from a light theme to a dark theme, which will be the result of this demo theme 3. Let's see this. So you can see that when I turn that on, it sort of swap all the dark and the light colors, and this goes well with this dark map. The last one is I'm going to show you how to add style modules within this style.ts file. So let's open this file first, and let's uncomment this function. So here I added a function called global styles function. What it does is basically to return a CSS which provides a new font family. And at the bottom, I'm exporting this function as the global style module. So on the fly, this CSS will be added as a global CSS. And the second, I'm going to also provide some custom CSS for the button component. So what it does here, it reads the theme variables from this props.theme. So here we have reference to all the theme variables. And here I am making the border radiuses for all the buttons to rounded, change the padding, change the text color, and also make all the text in the buttons to uppercase. And again, I'm going to export the functions as the button module. So let's go back to the builder and switch to the demo theme 4. So you can see the button within this demo widget, they have been changed to rounded border radiuses and has the uppercase text applied. So it's the same idea for like adding custom styles to all the other components that you can go to this storybook environment, and for example, if you want to override the checkbox styles, that you can export a function called checkbox in that style.ts. And so that's it for the demo. So after watching today's sections, what are the next steps for you to get started with developing for Experience Builder? So maybe first you can go to this samples repo directory to get all the great samples we have already put there, including, for example, the sample widgets mentioned in today's webinar, and also other code samples for widgets and the themes. And it is also helpful to check out this documentation set, which includes all the development guides, API reference, and also some other sample code. And if you have not get started, you can go ahead and start learning React, Redux, and TypeScript. So, and after all this, if you have any questions or feedbacks, please feel free to post those on GeoNet. And yep, I think with that, we'll wrap up with today's presentation. We will go ahead and take some time for questions. And Amy, back to you.
Thank you, Yiwei. We're now going to begin answering the questions submitted during today's presentation. We've received quite a few, and we will try to get through as many as possible, but whatever we do not get to today, we will address in a GeoNet blog post after this webinar. As a reminder, you can still submit questions through the questions pane in your attendee control panel. Our first question is, can you please comment on use cases to choose Experience Builder versus Web App Builder when creating a new web app?
Thanks, Amy. I guess I'll take that question. I guess it depends upon your requirements, right? As you know, we're in our 1.1 release of Experience Builder, and we'll be having our 1.2 shortly. So I guess my question is, it depends on requirements on, because what if there's some widgets that are in Web App Builder that solve your use case today, and you have a project that's due in, I don't know, 2 months. Well, if we don't have those in Experience Builder, then you have to create those. So that would be my first question. And then my second question is, what's your familiarity with developing with Web App Builder and Experience Builder? Because they use 2 different APIs for the JavaScript API. So yeah, I guess I would need more details on that to figure out, what is the requirements of the project to hopefully give you a better answer in that. So.
All right, thanks, Dave. For our next question, can we use functional as well as class-based React components?
Yeah, I'll take that one as well. Yes, you can. In fact, it's something Gavin and I were talking about a couple months ago. Is we need to provide some more in-depth samples of how to use functional components. When we first created Experience Builder, we were clearly focused on class components because it was the most stable at the time. And then obviously with React hooks and so forth, functional is got up there. So yes, you can. What we need to do from our side is add some better doc examples how to do that. So.
All right, thanks. And for our next question, how can I get the type declarations for the GMU libraries?
For the GMU libraries, okay. I know for we have a types folder. So if you hover over, so let's say you do imports editor from the JavaScript API and you hover over that, you go right click, you get the types for that. Yiwei, do you have any other thoughts on that question?
Yeah, so first one is like when you like for example using Visual Studio Code, as you type, it has those IntelliSense to help you getting reference to those, and also I think it's also better to check the API's doc side. I think they have all the those I think those as documentation written online, and also by using the developer provision, I think all the types are stored in its own I think typing folder. I forgot exactly the name of the directory, but the files are stored separately that you can check locally.
Yep.
Yeah, I can. Yeah.
Types. That client folder. So yeah, and I kind of mentioned that, but I probably didn't clarify it too much. That if you open the client folder as a project in VS Code, it kind of all just works because it discovers those types that Yiwei was just talking about.
All right, thank you. Will more of the calcite components be added to the GMU UI?
Okay. I can take that. So I'm not sure that's still a question. I got also the same question from others. The I think the technical issue is that the call-side components, they do not play well with the Experience Builder's theming framework. So call-side, they have like the light and the dark themes, and that's pretty much it. And they do not play well with the structure of the theming framework from Experience Builder. So for that, I don't know. So I think in the future, we are still kind of going to keep two tracks. So one for Experience Builder's UI components library, and another one for the call-side components. But yeah, I can do some research on like how to get these two UI components libraries together. Yeah.
All right.
But the short answer is not really in the near future.
All right, thanks, Yue. Is it possible for us to host a custom widget ourselves and point the app's manifest JSON to it, like we can with Web App Builder?
Sorry. Yeah, currently today that's not possible, but we have something on a roadmap to support something like that.
All right. Are React hooks supported? If so, do you have samples on how to use them with Experience Builder?
Gavin, you want to take that one?
Yeah, so that kind of goes hand in hand with the React functional question that we had before. So I think it's you can use React hooks if you're using React functional components, and we have seen people do that. But like David was saying before, I think we could add a few samples. So thanks for asking that question, and I think you know, getting that feedback, we can add a few more samples, so it'll be even easier in the future.
Great, thanks, Gavin. Can users add layers from ArcGIS Enterprise to an ArcGIS Experience Builder app, meaning individual layers rather than an entire web map? The individual only sees where layers can be added from ArcGIS Online, but not ArcGIS Enterprise. Is that true?
You can add layers from an ArcGIS Enterprise instance. If you go into the data source tab, there's a way to add via URL. If that answers the question, or if they're talking about runtime. If they're talking about runtime, obviously that would be a custom widget. But then within Experience Builder, you can add the URL, and it'll add it as ArcGIS service URL.
Okay, thanks, David. Are there any training courses on developing Experience Builder, either online or in the classroom? And if so, where can I find that?
Yeah, good question. To my knowledge, I think we are working on some training courses. Of course, what we're trying to do too is we're going to start creating some short 5-minute videos on how to do certain things in Experience Builder. We're gonna hopefully kick that in gear for upcoming release. But yeah, training is always great. I would say check the training site, because I think there's some courses that would be coming out.
All right, thanks, David. Is there a book from Esri Press that goes over developing with Experience Builder?
Good question. Not to my knowledge. Gavin, you might want to write one, right?
Yeah, I'll get right on that.
Yeah, not to my knowledge. And most likely we would know about it because they generally would contact us. But yeah, that's a good one. We'll have to look out for that one.
All right. Thank you, David, Gavin, and Yue, and thank you everyone for attending today's webinar, Developing with ArcGIS Experience Builder. If you have any other questions, please contact me using my email address in your follow-up email. Once you leave today's webinar, you will receive a survey on the presentation, and we would greatly appreciate if you would complete that and provide your feedback. We will be providing a recording of this presentation, which will be available within 7 to 10 business days on the go.esri.com/geodev page. And on behalf of Esri and our presenters, thank you for joining us today and have a great rest of your day.